Welcome back to my channel. Today Remy finally makes his intentions clear, and the truth sends a wave of tension through everyone connected to Dylan. For days, uncertainty has hung over the situation like a storm cloud, with cryptic messages, unsettling calls, and increasingly disturbing encounters leaving Dylan on edge. Questions have piled up without answers, creating an atmosphere of fear and confusion. Now at last the mystery begins to unravel, but what Remy reveals is far more troubling than anyone expected. When Dylan comes face to face with Remy, the confrontation carries an intensity that has been building for far too long. Dylan has spent so much time wondering who was behind the threats and what they wanted that the moment of truth feels surreal. Part of him expected chaos, anger, or some dramatic act of revenge. Instead, what he gets is something colder and far more unsettling clarity. Remy doesn't waste time with vague hints or half-truths. He tells Dylan exactly what he wants, and the directness of it makes the moment even more chilling. There is no confusion left, no room for denial. This isn't random harassment or mindless intimidation. There is purpose behind every call, every message, every calculated attempt to keep Dylan in fear. What Remy wants is deeply personal and deeply dangerous. Whether it involves leverage, information, control, or something tied to Dylan's past, the revelation forces Dylan to confront a reality he can no longer avoid. This isn't something that can be ignored or wished away. It is targeted, intentional, and escalating. The psychological impact hits hard. For weeks, Dylan has been living in uncertainty, imagining countless possibilities. Now that he knows the truth, he faces a different kind of fear. The fear that comes with understanding exactly what is at stake. His first reaction is disbelief. He searches Remy's face for signs of exaggeration or manipulation, hoping this is some elaborate bluff. But there is no hesitation in Remy's expression. The certainty in his words makes it impossible to dismiss. Dylan quickly realizes that this confrontation is not about simple intimidation. Remy has a plan and Dylan is central to it. That realization changes everything. The fear Dylan has been experiencing transforms into something sharper urgency. He knows he can no longer stay reactive, waiting for the next move. Whatever Remy is after, it requires action, now careful, strategic action. But even as Dylan processes this revelation, another battle is reaching its own explosive turning point across town. Hope has reached the limit of her patience. After weeks of feeling sidelined, dismissed, and underestimated, she finally decides that enough is enough. The ongoing tension with Steffi has reached a point where vague conversations and unresolved frustration are no longer sustainable. Ridge, caught between the women once again, has done little to provide the clarity or support Hope believes the situation demands. This time, Hope is done waiting for others to define her future. When she confronts Ridge and Steffi, there is no hesitation in her tone. She walks into the conversation with complete focus, carrying herself with a confidence neither of them can ignore. This is not an emotional plea or a request for reconsideration. It is an ultimatum. The shift is immediate. Steffi, who has grown used to seeing Hope as measured and diplomatic even in conflict, instantly recognizes that something is different. Ridge senses it too. There is a finality in Hope's presence that signals this conversation will not follow familiar patterns. Hope begins by laying out exactly where things stand from her perspective. She speaks clearly about the decisions that have affected her career, the lack of transparency surrounding those decisions, and the repeated expectation that she simply accept outcomes determined by others. Her words are calm, but every sentence carries force. She explains that this is no longer just about her line or a single professional setback. It is about respect, autonomy, and whether she will continue allowing her future to be shaped by people who refuse to treat her as an equal voice. Ridge listens carefully, but his discomfort is obvious. He has spent years trying to balance competing loyalties, often believing that patience and compromise would eventually smooth tensions. Hope's ultimatum makes it painfully clear that strategy has failed. Steffi, predictably, does not respond with retreat. She challenges Hope directly. asking whether this ultimatum is about genuine principle or simply resentment over not getting her way. Steffi insists that leadership requires hard decisions and that Hope cannot expect immunity from difficult realities simply because emotions are involved. But Hope is ready for that response. She makes it clear that this has nothing to do with wanting special treatment. What she demands is accountability and clarity. If Ridge and Steffi expect her to continue operating within the company, then certain changes must happen. The ultimatum is simple but powerful. Either they recognize her position and provide a genuine path forward, or she walks away and builds something entirely on her own. The words land like a shockwave. For Ridge, the statement is deeply unsettling. The idea of Hope leaving the company isn't just a business concern. It represents a fracture in the family and a failure of leadership he cannot easily dismiss. For Steffi, the ultimatum is both challenge and test. Part of her is tempted to call Hope's bluff. Steffi has always believed strength is proven through action, not threats. If Hope truly wants independence, Steffi might argue she should pursue it and face the realities that come with it. But another part of Steffi understands the significance of this moment. Hope is no longer speaking from frustration alone, she is speaking from preparation. That changes the calculation entirely. This isn't an empty emotional reaction, it is a decision that has likely been considered, planned, and weighed carefully. Steffi realizes that if Hope walks away and succeeds, the consequences could be enormous, not just for the company, but for the narrative surrounding Steffi's leadership. Meanwhile, Dylan struggles with the aftermath of Remy's revelation. The confrontation has left him shaken, but it has also given him something he lacked before: direction. Fear rooted in uncertainty can feel paralyzing. Fear rooted in clarity, while still intense, at least offers a target. Dylan begins thinking strategically about how to respond. Every option carries risk. Confronting Remy directly could escalate the situation. Involving others might expose vulnerabilities. Waiting too long could give Remy the advantage. The pressure is enormous. But Dylan knows one thing with absolute certainty: doing nothing is no longer possible. As both storylines unfold, there is a striking parallel. Dylan is being forced to confront someone who seeks power over him through fear. Hope is confronting people who have exercised power over her future through control. In both cases, the central question is the same: will they submit to circumstances shaped by others, or reclaim agency through decisive action? Hope has already made her answer clear. She stands before Ridge and Steffi unwavering, waiting for their response. Ridge attempts to diffuse the tension, suggesting further discussion, more time, another chance to work through concerns collaboratively. But Hope interrupts. She has heard variations of that promise too many times before. More discussion, she argues, has only led to delay. Delay has only reinforced imbalance. This time, she needs commitment, not conversation. Steffi studies her carefully. There is no anger in Hope's face, only resolve. And that may be what unsettles Steffi most. Anger can be challenged, resolve is harder to break. Across town, Dylan reaches his own moment of resolve. He begins taking concrete steps to counter Remy's plan, knowing that every move must be deliberate. Whatever comes next, he refuses to remain a passive target. That decision doesn't erase his fear, but it transforms it into momentum. Back in the confrontation, silence hangs in the room as Ridge and Steffi absorb Hope's ultimatum. The stakes are undeniable. If they dismiss her, they risk losing her completely. If they concede, they acknowledge that the current structure has failed her. Neither option is simple. And that is precisely why Hope chose this moment. For too long, ambiguity has protected others from making difficult choices while leaving her to live with the consequences. Now she has removed that ambiguity. The future of her relationship with the company and with Ridge and Steffi depends entirely on what happens next. At the same time, Dylan knows his future may depend on whether he can outmaneuver Remy before the situation spirals further. Both are standing at critical crossroads. Both have been pushed to their limits. And both are discovering that there comes a point when fear, frustration, and uncertainty must give way to action. Because once ultimatums are delivered and intentions are revealed, there is no returning to the safety of not knowing. Everything changes from here. The silence after Hope's ultimatum stretches longer than anyone expects. It isn't empty, it's loaded. Ridge looks between Hope and Steffi, aware that whatever he says next won't just resolve a moment, it will define direction. He's spent years believing he could manage conflict by softening edges, by giving everyone just enough to keep things moving. But this time, there's no middle ground left to stand on. Hope doesn't fill the silence. That, more than anything, signals how serious she is. She's not negotiating in real time. She's already decided what she will accept and what she won't. Steffi studies her, measuring. There's a calculation happening behind her composure. If she pushes too hard, she risks driving Hope out and validating every criticism about control. If she gives too much, she risks weakening the authority she's worked hard to establish. For someone like Steffi, that balance is everything. Ridge finally speaks, but even he can hear the difference in his own tone. It's less confident, more careful. He acknowledges Hope's concerns not vaguely, but specifically. He admits that decisions may have been made too quickly without enough transparency. It's a step forward, but not yet an answer. Hope listens but doesn't respond immediately. She's weighing whether this is acknowledgement or just another version of delay. Steffi then steps in, not to soften, but to clarify. She doesn't apologize for making hard calls, that part of her stance doesn't change, but she does recognize that communication broke down. She frames it not as wrongdoing, but as misalignment. It's a subtle distinction, but an important one for her. Hope catches that immediately. Misalignment doesn't put my work on hold, she counters. A decision does. That line lands cleanly. It cuts through the language and brings everything back to accountability. For a moment, it looks like the conversation might tip back into confrontation, but it doesn't. Instead, something shifts slightly. Not resolution, but adjustment. Steffi realizes that continuing to defend the past won't move this forward. Hope isn't asking for justification. She's asking for change. So Steffi pivots carefully. She proposes a structured path forward. Not a reversal, not a concession framed as defeat, but a conditional reopening. Metrics, timelines, clear expectations, a way for Hope's work to return, but under defined performance markers that Steffi can stand behind as a leader. It's strategic. Ridge immediately supports the idea. To him, it feels like progress, something concrete after too much uncertainty. But Hope doesn't accept it right away. Because she recognizes what it is, a test. And the question isn't whether she can pass it. The question is whether the test itself is fair. She asks for specifics. Not broad terms, not promises, details. What metrics? What timeline? What support? If she's going to agree, she wants clarity that prevents this from becoming another situation where expectations shift midstream. Steffi answers, precisely. And that precision matters. For the first time in the conversation, the power dynamic starts to rebalance, not because anyone surrendered, but because the terms are being defined openly instead of assumed. Hope takes a moment, then responds. She doesn't reject the offer. But she doesn't accept it blindly either. She agrees conditionally, on the understanding that the structure being set now will be honored without sudden changes or hidden variables. If she's stepping back in, it'll be on stable ground, not shifting expectations. Ridge exhales slightly. It's not resolution, but it's movement. Steffi nods, not warmly, not reluctantly, just with acknowledgement. This is the kind of agreement she respects, clear, defined, accountable. The ultimatum didn't end in a dramatic break. But it forced something just as significant, a recalibration. Across town, Dylan is in the middle of his own recalibration, but his is far less controlled. After the confrontation with Remy, the clarity he gained hasn't made things easier. It's made them sharper, more focused. The threat isn't abstract anymore. It has direction, intention, and timing. And that means every move matters. Dylan starts retracing steps, not just recent ones but further back, looking for connection points, moments that might explain why Remy chose him. Why now? Why this approach? It's uncomfortable, digging through things he'd rather leave alone, but he knows the answer isn't going to come from the surface. At the same time, he becomes more aware of his surroundings than ever before. Not paranoid, but alert. There's a difference now. Before, fear was reactive. Now, awareness is proactive. He notices patterns, timing of messages, gaps between contact, subtle consistencies that suggest planning rather than randomness. That realization confirms what he already suspected. Remy isn't improvising. This is deliberate. Dylan shares what he's found with the people helping him. The response is serious, focused. The situation is being treated with the weight it deserves now, not as a series of isolated incidents, but as a connected pattern. Steps are taken, quietly, strategically. But even with that, there's no immediate sense of safety. Because Remy is still out there. And the fact that he revealed his intentions doesn't mean he's finished, it means he's entering the next phase. Back at Forrester, the ripple from Hope's ultimatum continues. Even those who weren't present can feel that something changed. The way conversations flow, the way decisions are framed, there's more structure now, more awareness of how things are perceived. Hope returns to her work, but with a different presence. She's not reclaiming her place the way it was. She's redefining it. There's a shift in how she approaches everything. A more direct, more strategic, less willing to assume things will work out without clear alignment. Katie notices immediately. There's a quiet pride there, but also caution, because stepping into power, even in a balanced way, comes with its own challenges. Expectations rise, scrutiny increases, the margin for error narrows. But Hope seems ready for that. Steffi too adjusts, not outwardly but in approach. She remains firm, decisive, but there's a sharper attention to communication now, fewer assumptions. More clarity up front, not because she was forced to change, but because she recognizes that effective leadership requires it. It's not softness. It's refinement. Ridge watches all of this with a mix of relief and concern. Things didn't fall apart, but they didn't fully settle either. What's been created is a more balanced structure, but also a more delicate one. It will hold if everyone respects it. Across the city, Dylan reaches a point where waiting is no longer enough. He's gathered information, he's taken precautions, but one thing is clear: Remy is still driving the pace of this situation. And that's not something Dylan can accept anymore. So he makes a decision. Not impulsive, but firm. He's going to confront the situation on his terms. Carefully, strategically, but directly. Because as long as he's only responding, he's one step behind. That realization mirrors something Hope already acted on. Control doesn't come from reacting well. It comes from choosing when and how to act. Both of them, in very different circumstances, have reached that same point. The fear hasn't disappeared. The tension hasn't resolved. But the direction has changed. And that shift from being pulled by events to stepping into them means whatever comes next won't unfold the same way it would have before. Because now they're not just part of the story. They're shaping it.